to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee, and thank you for coming back for my conversations bridging arts, culture, and community. And speaking of which, welcoming back, I want to ask you guys for a favor. Make sure that you join, subscribe, connect with us on Instagram. That's Truth in This Art on Instagram. You'll see clips from these episodes, so the video portion, and you'll get some of the latest updates about the podcast as we move along. Marching towards 800 episodes. So yeah, that's a kind of a big milestone. So without much further ado, we'll get into the intro for today's conversation. So today I am super excited to welcome my next guest, a third generation Oakland artist who utilizes photography, installation, and experimental media. And his work examines issues of race, class, and intergenerational dynamics, inviting moments where collective storytelling could be a site for remembering. Please welcome Adrian Burrell. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you for making the time. I'm going to use probably the term international Adrian Burrell. You're from an undisclosed location right now.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit. You can say that. Yep.
So, before we get into sort of the deeper questions or what have you, I'm going to give you the space to introduce yourself. And I say that because, often we get like these artist statements, we get these different details that are somehow just not like in there. People go right for the art, not who the person is. And it's always something that's left out. And then upon conversation, you end up hearing like, oh, that's a really interesting detail. So I want to give you the space to introduce yourself in your own words, if you will.
I'm an artist, man. I'm an artist. I'm a storyteller. I've been shaped by a lot of different things in my life, mainly family. My grandmother, she had 16 kids. 12 of those kids had 58. 58 had 112, and 112 had 158. That's on my mama's side. And on my daddy's side, he had 10 brothers and sisters. So we all grew up in Oakland. My grandmother on my mom's side, she knew all of those people. She only passed away in 2020. So there was a lot of personalities around me. There was a lot of narratives, a lot of story, a lot of love, and a lot of trauma. And so all of that has come together to kind of create my worldview and the way and the reasons why I want to tell stories.
Wow. That one, you guys could start a league, different. I mean, I would imagine you got, the different cousins and so on. It's like, yeah, we're doing pickup basketball. Like I get to pick all of these different folks or what have you. And having like a huge family and different personalities, I know it's ripe for stories. So in that, and since you're a storyteller, I got to ask, before we, get really deep into it, what's a story like growing up, childhood that stands out, that is really impactful for you? And why does it resonate? Why does it pop for you?
Well, for me, really a story that's impactful for me and really resonates, and one that I'm still grasping at, is the story of our just growing up in Oakland, being a kid who lived on this line of play and death. When me and my cousins, my brothers, we had this certain proximity, being kids from the ghetto in East Oakland, where we can go outside any day and there'd be a shootout, you know what I'm saying? Or there might be something with the police, or there might be just some wild thing. It might be a car explosion. You never know what's gonna happen. Like weird shit just happen all the time. I remember one time me and my brother, we was walking down the street and these Samoans pulled up on us and they was like, "Hey man, y'all want this truck?" And we 13 years old. We like, hell yeah, we want the truck. So we get inside the truck and it's a screwdriver stuck in the ignition. And so we ride, it's a stick shift as well. Yeah. My brother is like, he think he can drive anything, right? So we going up and down East Oakland, from the deep to the shallow, up and down East Oakland in first gear in a Toyota pickup truck from like the 80s, right? It's like a 1980 something Toyota pickup truck with like a tow rig and whatnot in the back of it. And so we're going up this hill and this lady's honking at us, right? We thinking she finna call the police because, she probably like, who is these kids driving this truck?
Yeah.
And she honking. And she says, she pulls up on the side of us and she's like, y'all on fire, right? So I believe I was sitting in the middle. And so I'm telling my brother, I'm like, man, we going downhill at this point. It's a stick shift. He don't know how to stop it. and we
Oh,
starting to smoke inside the car. So I'm like, stop the car, stop it. So my brother finally stop it. He jump out, my cousin jump out, I get out, we running down the street. And next thing you know, the car blow up behind us. And so we running, we hitting fences. I'm hiding in some lady doghouse. When the police come in, we end up getting up out of there, going back to our auntie house and not leaving the house for the whole day after that. My auntie come like, man, what's wrong with y'all? We like, nothing. Nothing. We ain't saying nothing. But my brother was he was murdered in 2015.
mm,
And so one of the stories that really stands out to me is just like getting at what it means to be a child in the midst of things like that, what it means to live in this this line between play and death, and just telling a story, making this film that allows me to see him animated again.
wow. Wow. I mean, it's real life, and sort of that, you know, sort of distance as you're describing there of like sort of play and then the reality, having to, I guess, in some ways, kind of grow up fast, I suppose. Because, in Baltimore, Black City, we have all of these things. I'm 39. So, certain eras one grows up in, you're like, oh, right. Beware of those needles out there. Don't be outside when the drug dealers might be shooting at each other. That was just normal stuff, or limited to projects or what have you. Lafayette Projects, building 1035, seventh floor. You almost have to like know all of your lines, right?
Right.
And I remember when you hear like popping off, like instinctually we knew like, oh, they shooting, you should get down on the floor.
Right.
And that's the thing that's sort of baked in from that experience at a young age. Like we moved out of the projects when I was 10, moved in when I was 5. So it was just like, yo, this is what that is. And it shapes, or at least gives some color to, I know what my experience is. And I carry it, I suppose, where almost wherever I go. And, I don't sound like it or have you. I don't sound like the Baltimore accent, but the sort of mentality and sort of the experiences that I've had here, I don't think are dissimilar from what a lot of people in my age group, and even to a degree what you're describing in your experience also. What you were describing sounded like an action movie for a point, and you said it was an explosion behind us. It's like, yo, wow, that is.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say before I move into this next question, that story, sort of the part where you really articulated in a way that I was just like, I'm seeing everything. I'm like seeing you, not as many locks, but seeing like a younger version of you. Like, I gotta get in this dog, I gotta get out of here, I'm running.
Yeah.
I remember it was a birthday I had, and so stupid. I was telling you a little bit about my love of wrestling and going to WrestleMania before we got started. And my birthday is always around like Royal Rumble, right? So, me and a couple of my buddies, we went to get some popcorn. I don't know why, maybe before we were on popcorn or soda, because, stupid, right? And birthday's in January. So it's snow, it's ice, all of this stuff everywhere. I was like, yo, we should already have this. That's literally my thinking, right? So we go up there, we get the stuff, we're headed back. One of my friends with us, we're all young. I think I was just turning maybe 15, living in the project. Can't take, not living in the projects anymore, living in like near the county. Can't take the project kid and put him near the county. So I'm with my friends. We're walking. We're doing something really stupid, and I think we're just like running at dozens or something. And one of my friends has a pocket knife or a box cutter, something. I think it was a box cutter. Traffic is coming from behind us, going south. He just throws the box cutter in the traffic, smashes someone's window. They swerve and almost get into an accident. Turns out it was a guy in there with his pregnant wife and one of his kids in the back of the car. He lets them out on the corner, and then he follows us. Like, we're teenagers, black teenagers. He's a white dude. I'm like, yo, we got to find an alley. We got to find like the back road. We got to get away from all of this. And we were able to avert everything. We took like the backside streets and all of this stuff. And I just remember my dad was at the top of the block when we get back, taking forever to get there because we were taking all of these circuitous routes. And he's like, where y'all coming from? Y'all should have been back here like an hour ago. I was like, yeah, it's a long line for the soda in the store, all of the, the nonsense. And, just kind of knowing like, it's not going to be a conversation we're going to have with this guy. Like, this could be a bad situation. You know what I mean? And it was incredibly stupid. And just sort of the people you're around. I didn't throw anything, but I'm like, I'm with them.
Right. And I think it's like, at the end of the day, you were a child. And at the end of the day, in my situation, I was a child. And it's interesting how sometimes society looks at these children as adults before they should be.
Right.
And just to get back at that thing about play and death, it's like my childhood was fun. There was a lot of things that happened that were traumatic, but I didn't know it at the time because I was having fun.
Right.
And I think that there's something to that. And to tell a story that can have the levity of something like The Goonies, but the stakes of something like, A Menace to Society or Boys in the Hood is like, that's a magic trick.
Yeah. So you've mentioned Oakland, and as a part of sort of, it's within the DNA family. Oakland is within the DNA. So could you speak on sort of when the practice component began? Like, I've been doing these interviews or recording in some way, shape, or form. Probably that story I was sharing with you a moment ago probably started around then, of having the tape recorder and just recording stupid conversations. And eventually that craft develops and grows. But essentially we're sitting there telling stories like, this should be captured. We should talk about this. I want to listen to this again later. When did that practice begin, sort of the more nascent stage of it?
I remember in middle school, I was in a photography program and they gave us these disposable cameras, and I just went around my neighborhood. I went with my cousins and I would just take all these photos. And that's when I got into, before that, I was into poetry. Like I would like write poems and stuff like that. And then I started to think about how I can make visual metaphors, how I can make visual poetry. What does that look like to do that with a photo? And that went into film. And then I went back to poetry. Then I went into music. And then I was like, okay, like, which one of these things do I choose? Because people used to say like, oh, you have to specialize in something. And then I came to the point where I got into the San Francisco Art Institute, and I'm like, man, I'm not specializing in nothing. Like, I'm a storyteller, and whatever story I want to tell, you know what I'm saying? Like the medium is going to be chosen in the midst of telling that story. Mm. So yeah, that's just what it's been.
I love that. And I think, we have folks that, might not quite get the vision, or if I'm being petty about it, have a small mind, have, the capacity for big ideas, and almost want to put a governor on what one does. It's like, well, I do this, this, and this. It's like, but you can do all of that. Well, yeah, I can, because kind of that's what I'm doing. And, I think it makes you well-rounded when you have multiple things that you can kind of dip in. And it's like, well, this might work well as a poem. This might work well as prose. This might work well as video. And if people can't see that, how they intersect, that's on them. Your job is, and from what I'm seeing, your job is to just do it, just make it happen.
Yeah, and I think it's like, I come from a long line of people who turn shit to sugar. Yeah. And it's like when I would go into a kitchen and I'm like, I'm hungry. Yeah. And I'm like, Mama, ain't nothing here to eat. She said, we better find something. So I might look and I see some rice. And I might look, I see a can of tomato sauce, and I'm like, okay, if I throw this together, this gonna taste like spaghetti, kind of. You feel me? If I just cook this rice and throw some tomato sauce in it, or like just figuring out how to put things together, how to make something out of nothing, it was started as a survival tactic, but it's now like something that I can apply to my art practice, where I can hear a sound or I can see a snippet of a archival clip, or I can make these metaphors. I can put these things together from their desperate parts.
So why is it important? Because we talking on family and kind of revisiting some of the stories from growing up. Why is it important? And even in doing this, right? This is a document in many ways, in an archive. Why is it important in archiving sort of those moments in times, those stories, and kind of revisiting them? Why is it important to you?
I think it's important, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and where we come from, and having agency and control over those stories, because if we don't, somebody else will. And I think also in the sense of the way I collaborate with my family, because that's what I like to do. I like to work with my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, my brother, my sisters. Yeah. And it creates this ritual space. And within that ritual space, there's an opportunity. And that opportunity, we can deepen the connection. We can create a new language, create a new relationship to each other, or we can get rid of an energy. And to maintain the health of a collective, you need that process. You need that process of creating a space where you can release something, you can gather something, or you can deepen something. And when we don't have that, you see a collective illness begin to kind of like fester and grow. And one of the things that I've enjoyed most about creating is getting a chance to make new language and new relation with people that I love and care about the most, and with my community as well.
And it's good, I think. Thank you. It's good, I think, to be able to revisit some of those things with our stories and maybe come to a sort of mutual understanding. I don't know if you've encountered this within your work, but I'm sure with, having like family, right? That you might remember a certain situation one way and they remember it completely different. You're like, yes, I'm revisiting this. Can we talk about that? Because I want to make sure I got the facts straight. Has that happened in sort of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think it happens in the sense of, how do I say, just for an example, if me and my sister are collaborating on something, she might have a totally different experience of a situation than I have. At
Mm.
the end of the day, we might both feel like either we're not being heard or we're not being listened to. But then the new language and the new relationship that we have to come up with, we have to both be vulnerable, and we both have to accept, like, hey, I love you, you love me. We had a misunderstanding, but we both want to move forward.
Yeah.
And this is what it looks like to move forward. And I think growing up, we may not have had that type of framework or that type of example of how to move a disagreement or a conflict forward to something new.
Yeah.
But in the process of repetition, it's gotten to the point now where we've just deepened the space and potential of vulnerability and the potential of love.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, that's what I say about that.
It's good because I've collaborated with my brother. I have a brother. I have I had three siblings. I have a brother I grew up with and two half siblings who are older than me. And I grew up with my younger brother. And, he's been on, he had his own podcast on here. I was like, yo, here's the network. Let's do it. And blah, blah, blah. And every time we have some sort of conversation about, man, remember this growing up? And I'm thinking about it from one very specific perspective, my own, because that's the only one I really have or should be in control of, right? And he has his, and being able to get some sort of insight and context on like, oh, this is what you were encountering at that time. I had no idea. So now I might look at things differently and have a different understanding and a supposed different, I guess,
Right.
relationship or language around that.
Yeah.
So I read that often your work is engaging on issues of social justice, cultural heritage, labor, colonial systems. How do you set how do you see art as a medium for having these conversations? Like, and I think we're kind of around it, but how is like art generally like, a medium for having these conversations and asking those sorts of questions around these topics?
Yeah, I think about that makes me think about like knowledge creation.
Mm.
So a lot of the work that I've been doing, I've been looking at Clyde Woods, I've been looking at the research of Dr. Bador Allegra, Dr. Tiffany Barber, all these different people who are thinking about catastrophe and repetition and cyclical time.
Yeah.
And so for me, storytelling is the ability to conjure a blues moment. Making is the ability to conjure a blues moment. It's the ability to, in the current context of catastrophe, wherever point in that cycle we might find ourselves, being able to steal ourselves away via culture, via community, sometimes via refusal and via violence,
Yeah.
and say, this is how we're choosing to live.
Yeah.
All this catastrophe is happening, but this is how we're choosing to live. So for instance, after slavery, we got Reconstruction, right?
Yeah.
And during Reconstruction, we got the Ku Klux Klan. And with the Ku Klux Klan, we got the blues. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the blues not only being a form of music, but being a modality like mutual aid groups, being like groups that were coming together and arming themselves and saying like, we're going to defend ourselves by any means necessary. Like all these different things were happening in the midst of this catastrophe. And I think storytelling and art making is a byproduct or sometimes the root of those movements.
That's a really good point. And
That makes sense.
it does actually, because I think those are inflection points. Like, and one I want to touch on. I interviewed Dr. Barber, so that was really cool that you mentioned her, and and I think there are these inflection points that when we have these things that are for certain communities and for, large swaths of community, that's the focus. I'm looking for the hook. I'm looking for the thing that you're not expecting. And it's like, all right, what's happening in the background? What work is happening? What opportunities are there? Like, this podcast started 2020, right? So nothing big happened in 2020, only small, nothing big, nothing happened to anyone. And there were a lot of different things that happened from a racial standpoint, with George Floyd, from, sort of that perspective. And then, obviously COVID. And, my thinking is not necessarily skeptical, but I've seen enough things. I was like, what's happening? What's actually going to happen? This is news and this is important. But what's the other thing that's going to happen? And I think it takes us a few years to kind of see some of these things changing, like how we look at sort of underrepresented and unrepresented communities. You know what I mean? Like, how can we have them make this work? Because we see that there's a tension in traffic around sort of social justice intersecting with art. How can we monetize that? Because there's somebody sitting in the background that's like, how can we make this beneficial for us? It's like people are thinking about these things when a catastrophe is happening, when, sort of, it's like, what's the rebound? What's the next step? I remember it was a joke from a comedian I like, and he was talking about, I think there was a crisis and like a storm in Haiti. And there's a lot of people that passed, and it was just like, someone is behind the scene from a big company. It's like, all right, how can we turn this into a resort? Because that's sort of the thing you should be really looking at. Like, this bad thing has happened and we should do all of the aid and everything to support and help those folks. That's where people's attention should be and likely is. But there's a group of people behind the scenes. How can we turn this into a moneymaker for us? And so I kind of look at things in that perspective a lot of times, and sort of like, what is the response to this thing that we're all kind of, or large groups of us are kind of encountering?
Yeah. I think that, how do I say, empire has been empiring.
Go.
And the ways in which we, Black, brown, what I'm saying, people who aren't as resourced as other people around the world endure empire has looked very similar across time and space.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of scholars that are doing work to help us further reveal the fragility of empire. And I say that to say that, when we're going through a catastrophe and there's somebody who has a different interest in mind, being Black liberation, who sees a way to, capitalize off of my or our pain and suffering. And then there's me. I'm like, man, how we finna get free? You know what I'm saying? Like, how we finna get off this like rat racing out of this doomsday clock situation.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, man, empire been empire.
And I think that in doing this, like, as I was, sharing with you before we got started about, that sort of work of the point of sort of this this fundraiser I was describing. The point of it is to bring attention around it, that this is happening right in front of us. All of these cool things, this revitalization, we're calling it something else, it's religious gentrification. And, it's aligned in what it really, stuck out to me about, and really aligned with what I do here. This podcast started when, Trump said Baltimore was just a city filled with rats. And I was just like, yo, you can't say stuff like that. And I was like, it's not about the city, though. It's about the people in the city. People look like me and you. And then I feel like that conversation can be spread out and blown out even further. If these people that are in these spots can get, sort of Black folks out, Black and brown folks out, because they don't matter or their stories don't matter. I was like, what can I do through what I know, kind of archiving and, capturing these stories in that sort of moment in time? That's what I try to look at what I do as, like, not social work, but it's sort of, it's archival, but it's like community work. It has that sort of focus attached to it.
No, for sure.
At least that's the intent. That's the intent, because as you touched on earlier, if we're not doing it, who will? Whether it be for our community, whether it be for our families. And I got to ask, and one, I want to move into the sort of next thing. I want to, one, congratulate you. I see, what is it, 2024 Iranian Arts Fellowship? So
Yeah,
let's talk about
thank
that a
you.
little bit. Um, what was that feeling like? I mean, like I barely won anything. What is that feeling like for you? What does the award like in the fellowship mean for your journey as an artist, as a storyteller, as a creator?
I would say that it's always a plus when, what I'm saying, you're a working artist and you get resources to continue, because it is a very entrepreneurial, situation where you don't know where your next, dollar coming from sometime, or where your next sale is coming from sometime, or commission. And you just really out here, you're an entrepreneur, you're a business person at the same time that you're a storyteller and an artist.
Yeah.
And getting a grant like the Raining grant allows me to have a little bit of elbow room, and also allows me to put a little bit more resources into some of the projects that I'm working on and into my community. So, if I want to hire my cousin, or I want to hire, a family member or whatever, I'm like, okay, bam, I can afford to be like, all right, let me pay you well for this thing.
Yeah.
So it's been great. It's been an amazing opportunity.
That's dope. And I like that. Like it's sort of the same thing, whenever there's anything that flows my way, I'm like, all right, I don't really need this, but I need this to build that sort of capacity.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a volume guy, right? There was one year in this sort of arc where I did 300 plus interviews in a year. And someone's like, yo, how did you do that? I was like, because I'm a little crazy. I'm a little off. I like a lot of creative people, a little off. I'm,
Right.
in that sort of spot. And but in it, as sort of that stuff isn't as around, you're unable to, maybe hire the person that you would want, or pay them at the rate you would want, or it's a lot of it you're doing yourself. It's like, well, let me edit this piece myself, or let me, edit, let me do the graphics for this, or let me run the social media, or what have you. But once you have that sort of that fellowship and that sort of acknowledgement, because as you said, it is an entrepreneurial thing. You got to have that in your head. Um, and once you're able to have that, and I like the way you put it, that elbow room, you're able to grow and branch out and kind of see it to that sort of next stage, ride that wave, as I like to call it.
Right.
So speaking on specific works, I gotta go to, one that I may have been watching, rewatching before we got started. Let's talk a little bit about the Saint Step in Congo Time. Let's talk about it. Um, tell us what it is, please.
Yeah, it's a part of a larger body of work called Sugar Cane and Lightning, which is like a mixtape of Black life and American history from my familial perspective. So looking at the times in which my family has dealt with catastrophe, from the 1700s to the spiritual world till the present till now, and creating visual metaphors and meditations on those catastrophes, while also thinking about how the blues moment comes about within them. And it is it's the version that you saw the version that you saw is the Venus Blues edition, which takes us from Oakland to Louisiana to Senegal and back.
So let's talk a bit about sort of the process, because obviously it's ongoing, as it's there, what have you. And you know one, as I'm thinking about it, like sort of fresh, I'm like enraptured, and I like, you were talking about how like the setup for like Vimeo, so you got to have like the third. I was like, I kind of like this. I was like, I'm trying to pull in everything. That's why I was like, I want to rewatch it. I want to watch it
Yeah.
3 times. But talk a bit about sort of the creative process for working on this. Like, what does that workflow looks like? What is sort of the modes of collaboration, any techniques that come to mind, and sort of this work? So talk about sound. You were touching on that a moment ago. You said to come back to sound.
Yeah. So like one of the things like with that project, I go from, my family left Louisiana in two waves, one in 1927 and one in 1945 to come to Oakland. And when you think about home, you think about, at least for me, I think about home. I'm like, okay, home is Oakland. Then I travel the world. I've been over 30 different countries. And I'm like, well, Oakland will always be home, but I feel different things in different places. And I go to Louisiana and I'm like, okay, well, this is where we've been at since the 1700s. Like, what does that mean? Then you go to Senegal, and based on my research, I know I got lineage that goes back there. And I'm like, what does that mean to is home the continent? And I came to the realization that the closest to the continent, or the closest to home that I'll ever get, is the sound of my grandmother's voice. And when I was in Louisiana and I was in the middle of a sugarcane field, and I'm looking at this church that my family helped build in the 1800s and it's still standing. And some of the names of the people who I know are my relatives, who I seen in those national archives, I'm standing on their graves. Like, I'm sitting on their graves. Like, I'm standing with the dead. I'm standing with my peoples. And I I walk over to the ground and I put my hands in the soil, and it was humid. It was hot. And boom, a lightning bolt go through the sky. And I say, damn, Sugar Cane and Lightning. That's going to be the name of the book. Like, so that's the book that I have out right now, Sugar Cane and Lightning. And in that same moment, I started to think about the ways in which my grandmother's voice and the sound of it, kind of like her timing and her speech patterns, have survived something before slavery, something before the Middle Passage. Like, there's something attached to that sound that came before that still is alive in me. And that's the closest to Africa that I'll get. That's the closest to home that I'll get, is the sound of her voice.
Wow. Wow. Again, like I said, you're definitely a storyteller. The way you just described that, I'm sitting there, I was like, all right, again, I see it. I see current you. I don't see kid you from earlier. I see current you having this experience, and, finding that place, finding that sort of semblance of home. And it's a question that I've asked people, you know, generally in the rapid fire portion, which we'll be getting to in a few moments, but it's generally like, and I think some people don't get what I mean by it, but I think the way that you described it, you would get it, in that, how do you bring home with you? And that's sort of the thing. Like, as I was joking about, I've joked about it a lot, where I bring a certain sensibility wherever I go. It's definitely a Baltimore sensibility that I bring with me, and I sort of bring that. I just connected to me. That's a part of me. That's where my family is at. But, I would imagine, as I go to and do that archival work, you're making me feel like I'm lazy, making me feel like I need to be checking these archives. But going there maybe to North Carolina and seeing sort of that part of the history of my family, and getting a sense of like, all right, who are we really connected to? Who are the other people that are in my family, and diving into it. That's, like, I know a lot of folks that have done it. I've done it. My partner's done it. And several of the people I've done that I know have done it. You the whole admixture test. You're trying to find your history because you want to get a sense of who are we. And that goes back to, sort of the archival component. Who's keeping the records? Where is that stuff at? And more often than not, you get it from your relatives, your ancestors, your forefathers, your parents, your grandparents, and so on. That's where we would get all of it from. And it's like, yo, you got to go to Mecklenburg County. That's where your people are from, or what have you, and kind of get that context and kind of understand that a bit better. And I would imagine, I almost want a dose of what you were describing. I'm not going. If I see some lightning down there as I'm doing this, I'm like, yo, this is wild. It's gonna be like tobacco and like lightning or something. It's not gonna be sugarcane, because that's, North Carolina got tobacco, I think. No, but that's just really, really cool and really powerful. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
All right. So I got like one sort of like last real question, because, you've almost speed rounded most of my questions. I feel like I should have like come up with 10 or 11 questions versus like the 7 that I've had in this podcast.
I'm usually a person of few words. I usually don't talk a lot, and I try to use as few words as possible to describe things. People kind of tell me I should work on that, but if I got it, I'm like, okay, bam, I don't be stretching it out.
No, I appreciate it. It's like, there's a few things that makes my job easier. One, when someone is just like very verbose, and I'm like, you've answered 4 questions in your one response. I'm like, great. Or when they're like, this is kind of the answer. So you're going to do well when it comes to rapid fire. But before we get there, what's next? Like, what's next, as far as what you have on the horizon that you can speak on? I know that the Senegal premiere is going to be happening later in the year. But what's next for you? Like, what are you looking forward to in the next year or so?
Yeah, I'm going to be showing some work at the Museum of Black Civilization in Senegal in November. I should be showing some work in Berlin in Afro Lucian in a few weeks. I'm going to, where else am I going? I'm gonna supposed to go to Art Basel, Miami. Gonna go to Fog in San Francisco in the Bay. And yeah, also just looking forward to resting. Looking forward to digging deeper, getting some reading done, getting some writing done, kind of playing with a few new ideas that I have and collaborating with people.
Love it.
Also, my like I said, Cane and Lightning, that's out through Minor Matters right now. There's only a few copies left because it was a limited run. But yeah, that's out right now too.
Dig it. And we're definitely going to double down because we do have like the shameless plugs at the end. But before we get there, we got to get through rapid fire. And as you've probably noticed, I've been typing throughout this
No,
podcast.
I didn't even notice.
Oh yeah, I'm relatively smooth with it. So I got some rapid fire questions for you. And because because as you said a moment ago, that you're very good with it, very good with the short answers. You're gonna be
I try to be.
all right. Okay, so I got 4 of them for you.
Okay.
And as I tell everyone, don't overthink these. It kind of is what it is. It's opinions and all that stuff, but it takes a peek behind the curtain of who the person is. All right. So you mentioned later in the podcast that you've traveled a lot. What is your favorite place you've traveled?
Probably Brazil, Japan, Nigeria.
Okay. See, now as a person that's been studying Japanese for coming up on 300 days, look, we might have to talk off mic about, that experience because,
Okay.
the hongo, like
Right.
we're trying to get it in. We're trying to get it in. I'm curious about sort of the habits of artists. How many hours of sleep do you get on average?
On a good day, I'll go to sleep at around 8 or 9 and I'll wake up at 5 a.m. On a bad day, I'll go to sleep at around maybe midnight or 1 and I'll get up at 7.
Okay, you're doing pretty good actually. Like that's like what 6 to like 9 hours somewhere in that group.
I ain't a math person, but
you're doing well.
Yeah, I feel rested. Most of the time, even when I don't get a lot of sleep, I still feel rested. I'm just one of those people who can run off a little sleep.
Yeah, yeah. If I'm under 6, useless. I mean, I drink a lot of coffee, but yeah, if I'm under 6, useless. And there are some times where I was like, yo, like back in the day, a couple years ago, I was like doing 18 podcasts in a week here or there, and like, this is a lot of interviews and not getting the proper amount of sleep and just trying to fit it in. Now it's like, all right, I want to trim this number down because I need that like 7, 8, need to get that in.
Right.
Need to feel rested. The mind needs it.
The trick is you got to get a lot of sunlight before, in my opinion, get a lot of sunlight before you get ready to dial down. So you get that vitamin D and get some magnesium and, I'm saying, them lo-fi situations, you'll be out.
Definitely been using the magnesium, getting a little bit more sun, magnesium in the lo-fi, sort of like the binaural beats. Oh,
right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I slept in the studio last night, though, so I was living like a hot boy, staying up a little late watching baseball.
Yeah, you thugging.
Oh, it's hard getting prepared for Japan. So, we talked about Oakland a lot throughout, but a lot early on. You were setting the stage. So I got to ask again, sort of the habit piece. What is for you, what is a quintessential like Oakland meal? What are you doing leading up to the meal? Like what is like set the stage for a storyteller. I want to know what it is. Like, I'm pulling up, I'm in Oakland. Adrian, I need to know where's the food?
Okay. It depends on who I'm with. You know what I'm saying? And I eat a lot. I got a big appetite. I eat for like 3-4 people. So it wouldn't be abnormal for me to go to 2 of my favorite restaurants back to back to get what I really want to have going on. So Kaluchi Cafe, that's the Ethiopian spot that I would go to. In terms of Thai food, which is another one of my favorites, I would go to Champa Garden in East Oakland. And then in terms of like, I got hella aunties and a few of them can cook real good. So it's really a good day if one of my aunties, my Aunt Belu, if she cooks something, then you know what I'm saying, I'm at her house. That's where I'm gonna be at. If she cooks something and she let me have some, I'm gonna be at her house.
So what are you having at each one of these sort of stops? Because look, I mean, I'm following you. That's the thing I need to know. Like, what are we getting?
All right, so at Colucci Cafe, I'm gonna get the veggie combo. And if I'm feeling like real, you know what I'm saying, like a real boy that day, I'm gonna get the meat and the lamb tips, the bag tips, the juicy ones, not the dry ones with the rosemary. Then at the Thai spot, and I'm gonna get the not the gluten-free, the teff
Yeah.
bread, not the sourdough joint. Then at the Thai spot, I'm gonna get some passeyu with the shrimp. I'm gonna get a spring roll with shrimp. I'm gonna get a what's that? A chicken lop,
Yeah.
mango sticky rice, and I'm gonna make sure I get the hot chili oil on the side. All the Thai spots don't got the hot chili oil because it's more so a Chinese thing,
Yeah.
but some of them got it, and when they do, that go real good on the passeyu, right? So
Yeah.
then at my Aunt Belu house, you know what I'm saying, she do her thing. So she gonna have a little baked spaghetti. We gonna do that. And separate, I'm gonna just name all the stuff I like. Baked spaghetti, hot water cornbread. A lot of people don't know what that is. Um, I like collard greens, but my family do kind of mix the turnip and mustards together. They do that situation. She make a fire peach cobbler, sweet potato salad, beef ribs. Sometime I like a little like beef barbecue ribs. What else they be doing, man? It's a lot, man. It's a lot. I'm gonna say that though.
I'm, look, man. So we eating good then.
We good. We
No,
good. If I don't do nothing else, I'm gonna eat.
I love it, and I am a big fan of hot water. I love cornbread overall. Hot water cornbread, hell yeah. My partner, she
What do
makes
you
it.
think hot water cornbread is, though? What do you think hot water cornbread is? Because it might not be what I think hot water cornbread is.
I mean, it's almost like almost like corn cakes. It almost has like sort of that vibe. Like her people are from like Louisiana originally.
What it look like though?
They look like they're kind of like circular. So like maybe she does it a little different than the way that your folks are doing it.
They circular?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We talking about the same thing. Because some
Yeah.
people be talking about hush puppies. You know what
Oh
I'm
no.
saying?
Those
Like,
are something
I
different.
ain't
Those
talking
are
about
like
no hush puppy.
those are like
Okay,
Captain D's. That's
okay. Just so we on the same page. I ain't talking about no hush puppies.
no. We'll
Yeah.
have like that with like the Hoppin' John and the wild like collard greens or what have you. And
Okay, okay.
that's yeah, it's
You gotta dip that thing in the yeah.
it can't be too sweet. That's the thing about it. It can't be too sweet. Um, like if I'm having because it's different tiers of cornbread. We're gonna get to a deep cornbread conversation right now.
Right,
But
right, right,
different
right.
tiers of cornbread. Like I'm a
Yeah.
person like I love cornbread, and I remember watching an episode of I think some cooking show, and it was I don't know if it was Filipino or something, but they had their version of cornbread, and it was just like the bottom of the tray had like cream corn and roasted corn, and the bottom of it is the base, and then it was like mad sweet, but it almost had like a corn pudding with cornbread on top. I was like, I'm
Hmm.
with that. I'm with that.
Yeah.
Didn't turn out the way I would have liked when I tried the recipe, but I appreciate the attempt. It's like maybe
Right,
there was
right,
something I missed in there.
right.
But then when it comes to something that, like sort of when we have like hot water cornbread, it's definitely with it's kind of that New Year situation.
Yeah.
Usually it goes along with the Hoppin'
I got
John with
you.
the neck bones, the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's never overly sweet, but it slaps. And I think there's I forget what fat is in it. I forget what fat we're
Smack.
using.
It's smack.
It's no notes.
Yeah.
All right, so here's the last one. Here's the last one. What are you currently reading? Like you're a well-read dude. Like I'm hearing it. I'm like, all right, I gotta research this. Dude said this. Now I need to act like I'm smart and just but what are you currently reading? Like what's on your to read list?
Um, I've been trying to dig into Sylvia Winter
Okay.
and just her idea of this of human, like who gets to be human and who doesn't get to be human and why. And so I've been thinking about that a lot, and it's a thick text. And yeah, I just been thinking about that. I just been every once in a while I just pick up that book and I just start like underlining stuff, and then I'll put it down and I'll think about it for a day. So I ain't really speed reading through it. I'm just slowly going through that book. And I've been kind of in my own head a lot. I feel like I've lived a lot of different lifetimes in a short amount of time. And therefore, I've been taking a lot of time to just write and reflect and do voice memos and think.
Yeah, that's no, that's it's good. Like, I think I've I've dove back into some of the big audio book. I always have some audio in my ear.
Yeah.
I'm not a speed reader, but I can definitely divert attention in a couple of different places, and especially when I'm prepping for like interviews and stuff, I'll have like one of the books that I get a lot of energy from, a lot of like source material from. I'm like, all right, it's not like me taking exact quotes and questions and so on from that, but getting inspired from it. And I'm like, okay, that's a question I want to ask someone. Hopefully I can book an interview that this fits within this question, this sort of type of question. Um, and I'll spend time just kind of going through sort of the thinking around arts, not specifically, hey, how does this person make this visual? How does this person edit this or paint that? That's cool. And I want the guest to share how they go about it. But I want to dive further into the thinking, like what's underneath the sort of what's the first layer? What's the base layer? That's what I'm trying to get to. So I'm looking
Mm-hmm.
for stuff that makes me think and help stimulate that thought.
Mm,
Yeah.
for sure.
So that's kind of it for the podcast. You got off the hot seat. So shout out to you. And there's two things I want to do as we wrap up here. One, I want to thank you for being an international man of mystery. But thank you for coming on and making the time to be on this podcast today. And two, I want to invite and encourage you to share with the listeners where they can follow you, website, social media, any of those things you want to share, and each of the sort of final moments here.
Yeah, my Instagram is Adrian L. Burrell, and my website is down right now. Well, it's not down, it's a landing page basically. But if you wanted to get in contact with me, you can DM me, or you can go to adrianburrell.art and you can email me from there. Yeah.
And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Adrian Burrell for coming on to the podcast and sharing a bit of his journey with us today. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art, culture, and community in and around your neck of the woods. You've just got to look for it.